Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome to our final day of basic T factoring. And we're just going to mix up all of our different types of basic T factoring and talk about how to identify what type you're working with. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw these T's in our trinomials. And I like to keep the positive or negative sign with my last term. And it doesn't matter what type of basic T factoring we're doing, we're always going to find these factors. So again, what you could do is you could type into a calculator 80 divided by 2, and you get 40. 80 divided by 4, and you'd get 20. 80 divided by 5, and you get 16. And as long as you're getting whole numbers, that's fine. So I went through and found all my factors. And let's think about what happens if I multiply positives times positives, negatives times negatives. Well, a positive number times a positive number would get me a positive number. A positive number times a negative number over here, positive times negative gets me a negative. And I'm going to go to the middle now. A negative times negative gets me what? Well, a negative times a negative also gets me a positive. So as long as they're the same sign, as long as my two factors are the same sign, my last term will be positive. So if my two binomials are x plus something, here a positive times a positive gets you a positive, or if they're negative times a negative also gets me a positive. But as long as they're the same sign, that last term is going to be positive. But if I have different signs, if I've got x plus some number and x minus some other number, a positive times a negative will get me a negative last term. So let's decide if I have the same sign or different signs here. Just going to look at that last term. So a positive, well, the only way to get two numbers to multiply to a positive, I could have a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So these are going to be the same sign. All right, we got a positive last term, same idea. It could be positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So these are going to be the same sign. But over here, that should say 5x. Over here, I've got a negative last term. Well, the only way two numbers can multiply to make a negative is if one is positive and one is negative. And those are different signs. Okay, so last thing to determine here is this last term is negative. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our factors, 114, 2, and 7, and we're going to say, what's going on with this middle number, this middle term here, this negative 5x? Well, if that's a negative 5x, I've got to pick which pair out of these two pairs, which pair is 5 apart. Well, 1 and 14 are not 5 numbers apart, but 2 and 7 are 5 apart. And then we will look at if I've got a negative middle term or a positive middle term, well, if I have more negatives, then this will be negative. If I have more positives, that middle term will be positive. So we already said I have different signs because my last term is negative. And we know I have more negatives because the middle term is negative. So I want my bigger number to be negative because then I'll have more negatives. So I'll plug in my bigger number in the negative spot and my smaller number in the positive spot. And again, the reason why I did that is because this this middle term here is negative. So I wanted more negatives than positives. And that's it. So let's get 4 practice problems in. I'll do the first 2 and then I'll leave you guys the last 2. So we'll find our last term is negative. So I'm going to have different signs. X plus, X minus. All right, let's find our factors of 15. So 1 and 15, 3 and 5. Okay, now middle term. I want to have more negatives than positives. So I need my bigger number to be negative, and I need these to have a difference of 2. I need these numbers to be 2 apart. Well, 1 and 15 are not 2 numbers apart, but 3 and 5 are 2 numbers apart. So we're going to pick these 2, and I want more negatives than positives. So I'll put my bigger number in the negative, smaller number in the positive spot. And this last one here, let's do our basic t. Our last term is a negative. So I know that I'm going to have different signs because the only way to get 2 numbers to multiply to be negative is if I have a negative times a positive is a negative. So let's do 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Now let's look at our middle term. I want these numbers to be 2 apart. 1 and 8 are not 2 apart. But 2 and 4 are. And if I want more positives than negatives, because that middle term is positive, if I want more positives than negatives, I'll put my bigger number in the positive spot. And my smaller number in the negative spot. So I'd like you guys to pause the video here and try these last 2. And I'll write out the answers down below. So I hope you guys have a fantastic Tuesday. Please enjoy your summer, but stay safe. And we'll see you back in the school building, hopefully in the